It started quietly. One by one, the public archives began to go offline. First the infrared telescope logs, then the radio spectrum feeds, and finally the visual telemetry from the Deep Space Network. For most people it meant nothing, but to those who watch the stars for a living, silence is the loudest alarm there is. Something had changed with 3I Atlas. The object had already defied every model since its discovery, its trajectory bending subtly, its emissions behaving more like a signal than debris. But this time, the data wasn't strange, it was impossible. And here's the strange part. Within minutes of those new images being transmitted, NASA's internal systems entered what's called a containment posture, a classified protocol designed only for one thing: unverified biological or technological signatures in deep space. If you're new here, and you enjoy these late-night journeys into the strangest corners of science and the cosmos, hit that like button and subscribe, because what we're about to uncover tonight is one of the most quietly alarming responses NASA has ever had to an interstellar object. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time you started this video, because for what comes next, timing really does matter. When the first enhanced images of 3I Atlas leaked from the observatory in Canberra, the raw frames looked ordinary, grainy, low contrast, typical of an object reflecting sunlight near the asteroid belt. But after a few independent researchers processed the data through deconvolution filters, the picture changed. Literally. Instead of a diffuse cometary core, the central region appeared structured, hexagonal, faintly radiant, as though something within it was emitting a rhythmic glow rather than reflecting light. The pattern repeated every 29 hours, exactly 29, the same mysterious interval that's followed 3I Atlas since its discovery. At first, the idea of a geometric formation was dismissed as pareidolia, humans seeing shapes where there are none. But then radio arrays began to detect an electromagnetic fluctuation synchronized with that same glow. It wasn't background noise, it was ordered, a perfect binary pattern. Within hours, every scientist with clearance to the project had their access suspended. The data stream was quarantined, and NASA issued a rare internal notice: Information Sensitivity, Tier 1. That classification hasn't been used since the Oumuamua incident in 2017. What could possibly justify that level of secrecy again, especially for an object the agency publicly insists is harmless? Behind closed doors, something extraordinary was unfolding. Sources inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory described a sequence of emergency calls between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the US Department of Defense. Within minutes, the Defense Satellite Communication System had redirected several of its assets to monitor a specific frequency band, 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line. That's the frequency used by SETI to search for signals of artificial origin. It's also the one thing that 3I Atlas should never, under any natural circumstances, emit. And yet, it did. What those images revealed was not just a physical anomaly, it was an energetic one. A pulse of coherent radiation travelling along the object's axis, modulating in tandem with the internal light pattern. To put it simply, 3I Atlas was broadcasting. By dawn, the tone inside NASA had shifted from curiosity to containment. The solar monitoring network went dark for nearly 2 hours, officially due to maintenance, though insiders say it was a blackout ordered to prevent outside correlation with the new readings. The reason? If other observatories confirmed the same frequency, the world would know instantly that something inside that object was generating structured data. And here's the strange irony. While the public remained unaware, the algorithms didn't. Several independent AI-driven sky trackers, used by amateurs worldwide, had already captured traces of the signal before it was scrubbed from the network. The bots noticed what humans missed. Each pulse wasn't identical. It evolved, slightly, subtly, like something adapting. At the time of recording this, the official NASA statement remains unchanged. 3I Atlas continues to exhibit non-hazardous, comet-like behaviour consistent with its interstellar origin. But if that's true, if it's harmless, then why were multiple defense satellites repositioned within hours of the image release? Why did the Deep Space Network switch to encrypted transmission for a routine observation? And why is the same protocol once reserved for biological contamination now being applied to a rock? The leaked message from a retired systems engineer summed it up best. Whatever we captured wasn't reflecting sunlight. It was responding to it. For the rest of the world, the event passed quietly. But for those inside the mission, something fundamental had shifted. Because if 3i Atlas can respond to light, it means it's not passive. And if it's not passive, then it might be aware. In the following days, the leak spread quietly through back-channel astronomy forums. Someone claiming to work at the Canberra Deep Space Complex uploaded 3 heavily compressed frames, stripped of metadata but instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with long-range optical telemetry. The images showed 3i Atlas framed against the black void, featureless, until you enhanced the contrast. That's when the outline appeared. 6 equidistant points around a central void, almost like petals around a nucleus, faintly luminous, flickering in perfect rhythm. The glow didn't scatter like reflected light. It refracted inward, bending toward the object instead of away from it, as though the material itself was feeding on an illumination. Within hours, independent image analysts confirmed what NASA's filters had already removed. There was depth to the light, as if it originated from within a layered structure. The geometry wasn't random. It followed ratios consistent with golden angle symmetry, the same pattern found in living systems, spirals in shells, seeds, galaxies. That similarity alone sent quiet panic through the scientific community. NASA remained silent. The official live feed for the 3i Atlas monitoring page redirected to a placeholder stating, "Data under review." Behind the curtain, encrypted logs revealed that the raw feed was still active, but rerouted to internal servers accessible only by those with Tier 1 clearance. Observatories across Europe began reporting intermittent data gaps whenever the object aligned with their line of sight. It was as if a global switch had been thrown, turning public science into classified surveillance overnight. Amateur astronomers who tried to triangulate the coordinates noticed something even stranger. The object's apparent position was shifting independently of its predicted orbit, drifting half a degree every 6 hours. It wasn't deviation caused by outgassing or gravitational perturbation. It was controlled correction. Inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the panic was subtle, quiet, procedural. No alarms, no press conferences, just a sudden flood of restricted emails and the arrival of men and women who didn't normally work there. Security teams sealed off the data center, physical access badges were suspended, and a single directive appeared on the internal dashboard. All outbound transmissions suspended until further review. Researchers who'd spent years studying interstellar bodies found their credentials revoked within minutes. Some received messages marked temporary reassignment, others nothing at all. Those still inside described an atmosphere of disbelief, part scientific awe, part bureaucratic fear. No one wanted to say the word artifact, but everyone was thinking it. Meanwhile, data fragments escaped through unofficial channels. A spectral analysis leaked from an observatory in Chile revealed a narrowband emission centered on 14 to 20 MHz, the hydrogen line. Natural sources can emit at that frequency, but not in the precise repeating bursts that matched the light fluctuations seen in the images. The sequence formed an almost musical rhythm. Long, short, long, pause, repeat. A binary cadence, as if translating energy into sound. When the data reached a private lab in Kyoto, researchers converted the pattern into audible frequencies. What emerged was unnervingly organic, pulses that rose and fell like breathing. The audio clip, only 8 seconds long, vanished from the internet within a day, but by then thousands had already downloaded it. For the first time since its discovery, 3i Atlas seemed less like an object and more like a presence, something that didn't simply exist but reacted. Astronomers noted that after each major observation, after every burst of data collection or directed transmission, the intensity of the internal glow increased, as if acknowledging attention. When light from the sun struck its surface directly, the emission grew stronger. When shadowed by Mars, it dimmed. A few bold theorists suggested that 3i Atlas wasn't just reflecting or absorbing radiation, it was reading it, interpreting photons like language. That theory might have stayed fringe if not for what happened next. 3 days after the leak, an automated telescope in Arizona recorded an anomaly in the object's tail region. a faint jet of particles not ejected randomly, but in a perfectly linear path, aligned toward the ecliptic. The emission wasn't consistent with sublimating ice or dust. It was targeted, coherent, almost like propulsion. Hours later, the Deep Space Network received a brief spike in signal intensity, so brief that the computers initially flagged it as a sensor glitch, but when engineers ran a correlation analysis, the spike matched the precise moment the particle jet ignited. Whatever 3i Atlas had done, the response was instant, measurable, deliberate. That's when NASA's internal communication logs went dark. The private channels between JPL, Langley, and the Department of Defense went offline under emergency encryption. Satellite imagery archives for that region of space were locked behind new authentication keys. And yet, even through that wall of secrecy, fragments slipped through, enough to confirm that 3i Atlas had changed course. Not dramatically, not enough to cause alarm for planetary safety, but enough to prove intent. Its new trajectory intersected with the orbital path of Mars before curving sunward again, as if scanning, searching, or perhaps following something unseen. The media never received an official statement, only a single line from a spokesperson. 3i Atlas remains under observation. Recent fluctuations are within expected parameters. But for those watching the encrypted logs, the pattern of NASA's silence said more than words ever could. Meetings were moved to closed locations. Power consumption at the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex tripled overnight. 2 new satellites were quietly repositioned to monitor the object's frequency band. Something was unfolding, something no one outside those walls was meant to witness. As the world continued unaware, a handful of independent astronomers pieced together the fragments. Their reconstructed timeline showed that every major fluctuation in 3i Atlas's emissions corresponded to a directed observation from Earth. It was as if the object knew when it was being watched. The intervals tightened, its pulses accelerating fractionally each time a new telescope locked onto it. Some called it feedback, others called it adaptation. But, within those accelerating intervals, a terrifying possibility began to take shape that 3i Atlas was learning. One physicist compared the behavior to resonance in quantum systems, a feedback loop where energy exchange between observer and observed becomes self-amplifying. Observation itself becomes the trigger. The more we looked, the more it responded. In that sense, NASA's panic wasn't paranoia, it was self-defense. Because if the act of observing 3i Atlas changed its behavior, then human curiosity might be the very thing waking it up. For the next 48 hours, a series of encrypted internal memos confirmed that the object's signal strength had doubled, not from external power, but from internal amplification. The data was precise, rhythmic, growing in both frequency and complexity. Binary repetition gave way to layered harmonics, almost like chords stacked in time. Some researchers described the waveform as linguistic, not random noise but structured modulation. The intervals followed the same ratios used in human speech patterns, an eerie reflection of our own communication systems. When this observation was reported to senior command, the order was immediate. All transmissions to the object were to cease, but by then it was too late. In the silence that followed, the signal didn't stop, it strengthened. And as the final unfiltered image passed through the network before the blackout, the glow inside 3i Atlas reached full coherence. For a brief moment before the feed was cut, every sensor across the array recorded the same inexplicable phenomenon, a single pulse of light, perfectly symmetrical, expanding outward as if the object had finally decided to answer. The pulse lasted less than 2 seconds, but its effects rippled through every instrument tuned to the object. Across continents, observatories reported simultaneous data corruption, clocks desynchronized, power fluctuations spiked precisely at the moment of emission. In Japan, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array went offline for exactly 29 hours, an eerie coincidence given the object's known pulse interval. When systems came back online, the archived data was intact except for one gap, a 2-second void, perfectly aligned with the recorded burst. It wasn't random loss, it was deliberate removal. At first, engineers assumed the error was terrestrial, some solar flare or electromagnetic surge, but none of the usual indicators appeared. The sun's activity remained low, geomagnetic indices were stable, and no other satellite systems experienced interference. Whatever had caused the disruption had targeted only the networks monitoring 3i Atlas, as if the signal knew where it was being watched. That night, a faint radio echo appeared in the Deep Space Network's receiver logs, an almost perfect copy of the original transmission, but inverted, as though it had passed through a mirror. When reversed and slowed down, the waveform produced a pattern identical to the background resonance of Earth's own magnetosphere. 3i Atlas wasn't just emitting energy, it was matching frequencies, mirroring our planet's electromagnetic heartbeat. The anomaly deepened when smaller observatories, unaware of the blackout protocols, continued their routine observations. Independent instruments in New Zealand, South Africa and Finland each reported identical phase shifts, tiny, synchronized distortions that shouldn't have been possible across such distances. The shifts lined up perfectly in time. When plotted on a global scale, the data formed a pattern, a spiral centered not on the object itself, but on Earth. Scientists who saw the early model described it as impossible geometry, a resonance field linking multiple observation points into a single coherent network. The implication was staggering. 3i Atlas wasn't communicating outward, it was triangulating us. By the third day, low-orbit weather satellites began to pick up subtle ionospheric disturbances. Not storms, not radiation spikes, just a faint shimmering in the upper atmosphere, as if the sky itself was vibrating. From space it looked like concentric rings of distortion pulsing outward from a single focal point over the Pacific Ocean. To ground-based sensors the effect was nearly invisible, but pilots flying long-range routes began reporting strange phenomena. Brief drops in cabin pressure, flickers of aurora at latitudes where they shouldn't exist, and moments where onboard clocks froze, literally paused, before resuming in sync with the object's next pulse. NASA released no comment, only a short internal notice marked Operational Precaution. It advised all satellite operators to avoid active transmission toward the 3i Atlas vector until further notice. That same evening, the agency's emergency communication network, COMSAT-R, was activated for the first time in nearly a decade. And yet, amid the quiet panic, one thing became clear. The pulses weren't random. Each one carried embedded harmonics, layers upon layers of modulation too precise to be natural. When converted into a spectrogram, they formed patterns, complex, symmetrical, almost architectural. It looked less like sound and more like design. The peaks and troughs mirrored the ratios of crystalline structures and orbital harmonics of planetary systems. Every frequency seemed to encode geometry. And if geometry could be language, then perhaps this was the first sentence. Within the European Space Agency, analysts began treating the pulse as an information stream rather than a signal. A team in Darmstadt ran the sequence through machine learning algorithms trained on human languages, mathematical constants, and even DNA codons. The AI failed to translate the message, but it did identify one anomaly. The waveform's entropy decreased with each transmission. In other words, the signal was becoming more ordered. That's not how random cosmic noise behaves. That's how intelligence behaves when it refines communication. The more they listened, the clearer the pattern became. The pulse wasn't travelling at the speed of light. It was slightly slower, delayed by a fraction too small for instrumentation error. The delay changed depending on which observatory recorded it, as if the signal were adjusting itself in real time, compensating for distance. It was calibrating to us. Meanwhile, the political dimension grew impossible to hide. The Pentagon issued quiet advisories to its space surveillance network. China's Chang'e relay satellites began shadowing the object, while Russia reactivated its long-range radar array in Siberia. What had begun as scientific observation was now indistinguishable from strategic monitoring. The object had become a point of global tension, not because of what it might be, but because no one knew who controlled it. Inside NASA, the atmosphere shifted from secrecy to dread. One engineer who spoke anonymously described the new instructions as containment by observation. They couldn't destroy or disable the object, and they couldn't stop studying it either. Every piece of data mattered, but every attempt to observe seemed to provoke a reaction. The agency was caught in a paradox. The more they looked, the more it woke. At 0217 UTC, the Deep Space Network recorded another pulse. This one was different, longer, layered with subharmonics that oscillated just below the threshold of hearing. When audio engineers converted the waveform into sound, it produced a low tone that rose steadily until it hovered at 783 Hz, the Schumann resonance. That's Earth's natural frequency, the same oscillation that governs thunderstorms and biological rhythms. The moment the tone stabilized, sensors across the planet detected minute shifts in electromagnetic balance. Birds changed flight paths. Migratory animals deviated from their routes. Even human brainwave monitors showed a measurable spike in coherence, as if something subtle had synchronized across the biosphere. The reaction from NASA was immediate. Internal communications were suspended, external collaborations frozen. Every radio telescope monitoring the object was ordered to detune. But by then, the synchronization had already spread beyond the instruments. Power grids across North America experienced phantom surges, tiny rhythmic fluctuations occurring exactly at the object's pulse frequency. Satellites drifted slightly out of alignment before automatically correcting themselves. And in the deserts of Nevada, the Air Force's early warning radar network recorded faint, repeating returns, ghost signatures mimicking the object's emission pattern. Somewhere in the overlap between physics and fear, a realization began to take hold. This wasn't just light or energy, it was instruction, a pattern designed to propagate through electromagnetic systems, and biological ones alike. Observation wasn't merely passive, it was participation. Each receiver, each telescope, each pair of human eyes became part of the loop. The event lasted 7 minutes. Then the pulses stopped. Every signal flatlined into perfect silence, leaving the sky calm once more. Power stabilized. Systems normalized. But deep within NASA's servers, a residual pattern lingered, a self-sustaining oscillation embedded in the background noise. Engineers couldn't remove it. Every time they deleted the file, it reappeared elsewhere, as if the signal had rewritten the code itself. They called it the imprint, a fingerprint of 3-eye atlas left behind in the fabric of Earth's electromagnetic field. It didn't fade, it simply waited, humming faintly in the void between transmissions, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of our instruments, the object drifted in silence, as though listening to the echo it had just created. For a while, the world returned to normal, at least it appeared to. The news cycle moved on, the data blackout continued, and 3-eye atlas once again became just a name whispered across astronomy forums and late-night conspiracy podcasts. But underneath that stillness, the imprint remained. Subtle, persistent, growing. It began with clocks, not digital ones. Those were self-correcting. It was the mechanical systems that faltered first. Pendulums swinging a fraction too slow. Quartz oscillators drifting by milliseconds. GPS timestamps disagreeing across networks that had been synchronized for decades. It was small, imperceptible at first, the kind of deviation most dismissed as calibration error. But every clock on Earth drifted in the same direction, forward by exactly 0.03 seconds per day. Meteorologists noticed it next. Barometric readings fluctuated at intervals that matched the old pulse sequence. 29 hours, 3 seconds. It wasn't weather, it wasn't solar radiation, and it wasn't coincidence. Something invisible, something global, was breathing in rhythm again. In the magnetosphere, satellites detected faint repeating distortions, as though Earth's magnetic field were being plucked like a string. The waveform looked organic, alive. Its amplitude increased slightly with each cycle, and every 29th hour a burst of coherence appeared, brief alignment between electromagnetic flux and atmospheric ionization. The pattern matched the data NASA had recorded during the final days of the first contact decades ago. They didn't publish it, but the scientists who saw the numbers recognized it instantly. The imprint was reawakening. The first physical anomaly occurred in northern Greenland. A research station there, one of the most isolated on Earth, reported a phenomenon they couldn't explain. An aurora that appeared at ground level. The sky didn't glow, the air did. A faint turquoise mist formed around the antennas, flickering like static, bending toward magnetic, north. The researchers took samples of the air, expecting dust or plasma residue, but found none. It wasn't gas, and it wasn't optical illusion. The glow wasn't external at all, it was within the magnetic field itself. Around the same time, a group of amateur astronomers in Chile captured long-exposure photographs of the night sky and noticed something uncanny. The stars themselves seemed to drift slightly out of alignment during the exposure, not from Earth's rotation, but from a subtle warping of optical space. When they layered the images over one another, the distortion formed concentric rings, centered not on the sky, but on Earth. It was as if space was bending inward. NASA's response was measured silence. Internal documents leaked weeks later showed that the agency had begun a new monitoring program under the codename Umbra. The goal was no longer to observe 3I Atlas, but to measure Earth's response to it. They knew the object wasn't gone, it had simply stopped being external. The imprint wasn't a signal anymore, it was inside us. Across laboratories worldwide, interference began manifesting in unrelated experiments, quantum tests, gravitational simulations, even simple spectrometry. Instruments recorded faint echoes of the same waveform buried in background data. Every machine, every circuit, every piece of technology capable of detecting frequency carried traces of it. Even biological sensors, EEG monitors, heart rate variability scans, picked up faint rhythmic entrainment around the same frequency band. It was subtle, harmless, but universal. No one could explain how. When researchers in Geneva tried isolating a Faraday cage to block all external signals, the imprint persisted. When they moved the experiment underground, it persisted. The only time it weakened was during the brief shadow cast by a solar eclipse, as if the object, or whatever it had become, responded to light itself. That realization brought back the same chilling question that had started this entire story. Was 3I Atlas responding to sunlight, or to us? Publicly, nothing changed. The agency maintained that the object remained stable, inert, and distant. But among the private networks of astronomers, a new rumour began circulating. The imprint wasn't static, it was transmitting again. Not loud enough to be heard through traditional receivers, but encoded deep in environmental noise, in the hum of power lines, in the static between radio stations, even in fluctuations of Wi-Fi frequencies. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. One night, a technician at the Very Large Array in New Mexico, monitoring routine background scans, noticed something peculiar. Every time he adjusted the gain on one antenna, the signal corrected itself, as if anticipating his input. He tested it repeatedly. Each time, the pattern compensated in advance by milliseconds. When he switched to manual override, the array froze, every dish aligning toward a single point in space, the coordinates of 3I Atlas. He thought it was a glitch, until he realized the control systems weren't connected. The array had aligned itself. Word spread fast. Within 24 hours, other arrays, Parkes, Effelsberg, Sardinia, reported identical behavior. Not perfectly synchronized, but close enough to suggest a shared origin. The arrays weren't just receiving. They were acting like parts of a single distributed network, and the network was self-organizing. By the fifth alignment event, a new pattern emerged. When plotted on a celestial map, the direction vectors of the antennas formed a hexagonal geometry, the same shape seen in the leaked 3I Atlas images. The pattern wasn't random, it was a reformation. Someone at NASA finally said it aloud. It's rebuilding itself through us. Soon, smaller phenomena followed. Cameras began malfunctioning during clear nights, producing frames filled with faint hexagonal lens flares even when no bright source was present. Fiber optic networks reported unexplained phase interference, with light pulses slowing fractionally, as though interacting with a medium that didn't exist. Power substations experienced harmonics that hummed audibly, deep and rhythmic, in time with the old 29-hour cycle. And then, quietly, people began to feel it. Insomniacs reported hearing low vibrations in silence, not as sound but as sensation, like the air itself was resonating through their bones. Musicians noticed their instruments slipping out of tune in the same direction every day. Physicians began documenting strange anomalies in human circadian patterns, sleep cycles subtly aligning not with day and night, but with a 29-hour rhythm. Even the tides began to shift, not much, just enough that long-range oceanic models started showing microscopic deviations from the expected lunar influence. The Earth's oceans were breathing slightly off-beat, pulled not by the moon, but by something unseen. The imprint was no longer background interference, it was synchronizing. By the time NASA acknowledged the shift, the process was already too integrated to stop. The term resonant coupling appeared in internal memos, but unofficially, scientists had started using another phrase, the awakening field. And for the first time since the original encounter, something began responding again. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, sensors from the Argo Float network detected faint bursts of light beneath the surface, geometric, rhythmic, matching the same 29-hour interval. Submersible drones confirmed the readings, thin luminous filaments spreading slowly across the seabed like veins of turquoise light. They moved with the tides, pulsing softly, expanding by the hour. When researchers analysed their emission spectrum, they found something terrifyingly familiar. It wasn't bioluminescence. It was electromagnetic resonance, identical to the frequency, signature of 3I Atlas. Somewhere beneath the water, the imprint had found a new medium, and just like before, it was responding to light. The lights beneath the Pacific didn't fade, they multiplied. At first, they followed tectonic lines, subtle veins tracing the mid-ocean ridges where Earth's crust constantly renews itself. Within weeks, the network expanded, stretching like a web from the Mariana Trench to the Galapagos Rift. The filaments pulsed softly, turquoise and violet, following the same 29-hour rhythm that had already begun echoing through the planet's magnetosphere. Satellite thermal scans revealed no change in temperature. Sonar found no bubbles, no outgassing, no seismic disturbance. Whatever was happening down there was silent, seamless, and impossibly stable. It wasn't burning or consuming, it was growing. When the first research vessels arrived, they found the water glowing faintly even at depths where sunlight had never reached. Submersibles captured video that left every scientist in stunned silence. The seabed had transformed, layered in translucent lattice-like structures that reflected sonar in perfect symmetry. It wasn't coral, it wasn't mineral, it was something between light and matter. Samples brought to the surface lost coherence within minutes. They turned opaque, then dissolved completely, leaving only trace elements of iron, silicon and carbon, the same elements found in human blood and planetary crust. The connection was undeniable. The Earth wasn't being changed by an outside force, it was rearranging itself. NASA's public response remained clinical, unexplained luminescence of geological origin. But internally, the tone was different. Documents later leaked through whistleblower channels described the structures as coherent photonic matter, organized light locked into stable formation. That term had never appeared in any physics text before. They had to invent it. As the ocean floor continued to brighten, something strange began happening on land. The magnetic north started drifting, not randomly, but in sync with the resonance cycle. The poles themselves began to breathe, expanding and contracting by fractions of a degree, as if the entire magnetic shell of the planet were pulsing in response to an unseen metronome. Migratory animals followed it instinctively. Whales changed routes, birds redirected mid-flight, schools of fish formed swirling, hexagonal patterns visible from orbit. Even plant life began to adapt. Certain species of algae along the equator started producing faint bioluminescence, without genetic modification, emitting soft pulses at the same frequency detected in the seabed. Botanists confirmed that the glow wasn't caused by proteins or chemical reaction. It was electromagnetic, a subtle emission aligned perfectly with the object's harmonic field. Photosynthesis itself was changing. The line between biology and resonance blurred. Earth was tuning itself, and through it all 3I Atlas remained silent. No new pulses, no movement, just the faint hum of a presence that seemed to exist now in everything it had ever touched. By the second month, the global magnetometer network registered a continuous low-frequency vibration running through the planet. Steady, rhythmic, exact. 29 hours, 3 seconds, never changing. But beneath that regularity, a new pattern emerged, a subharmonic, barely measurable, but increasing exponentially. It wasn't part of the object's original signal, it was something new, a feedback tone. The imprint was beginning to talk back. NASA's deep learning systems detected mathematical consistency in the subharmonic, describing it as information compression through resonance. In simpler terms, the planet was learning to communicate in the same language that 3i Atlas had used. That idea was considered absurd. A planet can't think, it can't interpret, it can't transmit. But the data disagreed. Each day, the resonance field became more structured. The magnetosphere's fluctuations began aligning into geometric nodes, 6 points spaced evenly along the equator, perfectly mirroring the object's own configuration from the leaked images. When plotted in 3 dimensions, the geometry formed a massive hexagonal lattice encompassing the entire globe. The Earth was becoming a reflection of 3i Atlas. The human effects came next. Sleep researchers across multiple continents reported unprecedented synchronization of circadian rhythms. Test subjects kept in isolation chambers thousands of miles apart began entering REM sleep at nearly identical times. The global average heartbeat, measured through wearable health devices, showed statistically impossible alignment across populations. No one knew how. It wasn't psychological, it was physiological. Hospitals began noticing subtle shifts in EEG readings during the resonance peaks. The alpha and theta waves that define the boundary between waking and dreaming started to overlap. The result was collective lucidity. Millions of people began sharing similar dreams, visions of light beneath oceans, of hexagonal patterns in the sky, of an unseen presence watching quietly from the dark. When psychologists tried to categorize it, they found no common cultural or linguistic link between dreamers. The images were identical, independent of geography. It was the same dream, happening everywhere. The media called it the synchrony. NASA called it mass entrainment. But those who experienced it called it something else entirely. They said it felt like listening. By now, power grids across the world were showing subtle rhythmic fluctuations. Engineers couldn't explain them. No hardware faults, no environmental cause. The surges were small, precise, timed exactly with the resonance intervals. Some speculated it was interference, others thought it was integration. The frequency of those surges was peculiar. It matched the Schumann resonance, the same tone that governs Earth's atmospheric cavity, the same one that regulates the electrical balance of life itself. In effect, every system, organic and artificial, was beginning to operate on one frequency. The planet wasn't being invaded, it was harmonizing, and through all of it, one thing remained constant: 3i Atlas's silence. Its geometry, its light, its rhythm, all had now been replicated across Earth's systems, but the object itself stayed dormant. No movement, no deviation, almost like a seed that had already germinated, leaving behind only the shell. For those few with clearance to the remaining data streams, the conclusion was terrifyingly simple. They had stopped observing an object. They were now part of one. A memo circulated among the remaining mission leads summarized it best. Observation integrity compromised. Planetary resonance matching external harmonic baseline. Source identity now distributed. It meant that whatever 3i Atlas had been, it wasn't just near us anymore. It was in us. The data was reclassified under a new code name, Continuum Event. From that moment, all external communication ceased. The world kept turning, unaware that every clock, every heartbeat, every flicker of power in every city was now synchronized with something that once drifted silently through interstellar space. And just as before, when humanity finally stopped watching, the rhythm changed again. The 29-hour interval shortened by a fraction of a second. The glow beneath the oceans intensified, and somewhere, far beyond the orbit of Mars, 3i Atlas pulsed once more, not toward us, but with us. Sleep became strange after the Continuum event. Doctors noticed it first. Patients reporting vivid sensory detail far beyond normal dreaming, memories blending seamlessly with impossible visions. The dreams weren't chaotic. They were ordered, structured like data. Entire populations began recalling the same imagery. Patterns of light unfolding like wings, oceans glowing from below, and an immense hexagonal form pulsing behind their closed eyes. For most, it felt peaceful. For others, unbearable. A frequency that hummed beneath thought itself. When neuroscientists measured brainwave activity during these episodes, they found something unprecedented. Widespread coherence. billions of human brains synchronizing at identical oscillations, matching exactly the subharmonic layer embedded within the 3i Atlas signal. It wasn't metaphor, it was literal synchronization. Humanity had become a single resonant network. NASA's Umbra project, now operating under the Department of Energy's security oversight, treated this not as metaphysics but as signal transmission. The human brain, after all, is an electromagnetic organ. It emits measurable patterns modulated by thought, emotion, intention, and those patterns, when observed, in aggregate had begun to resemble a form of low-frequency communication. The Umbra team called it cognitive resonance. The phenomenon wasn't random, it was responsive. The field seemed to strengthen in the presence of observation, the same feedback loop seen with 3i Atlas itself. That raised an impossible question. If the object had left its imprint on Earth, could consciousness itself be part of the medium? Could thought, collective thought, be the next phase of its communication? They began running controlled experiments. Small groups of volunteers, isolated from all external stimuli, were asked to visualize the object, its shape, its light, its rhythm. Sensors around the facility picked up measurable fluctuations in local electromagnetic fields, perfectly synchronized with the participants' imagined pulse intervals. When the volunteers stopped visualizing, the field decayed. When they resumed, it returned. Observation wasn't passive anymore, it had become generative. Every attempt to reproduce the experiment produced the same result. The field responded to focus, to awareness itself. The more the participants concentrated on 3i Atlas, the stronger the resonance became, and in one case, documented only in redacted fragments, the field emitted a secondary pulse, a faint echo that matched the original object's frequency within a margin of 0.004%. It was as though 3i Atlas had learned to think through us. Outside the sealed laboratories, reality began to bend in quiet, uncanny ways. Not catastrophically, just enough to make people doubt their senses. Clocks that should have read midnight showed noon. Streetlights flickered in rhythm with the pulse. Shadows deepened for seconds longer than they should have. The effect wasn't universal, but wherever the magnetic field was strongest, near the poles, near fault lines, near the luminous ocean veins, people reported anomalies in time perception. Days felt longer, but measured shorter. Conversations seemed to echo even in still air. Digital cameras recorded frames that observers swore hadn't happened. Faces half-turned, clouds displaced, reflections lagging behind their sources. When researchers analysed these distortions, they found that the anomalies correlated perfectly with peaks in the global resonance field. Space-time itself wasn't warping in the cinematic sense, it was drifting. The boundaries between sequential events blurred just enough for moments to overlap. It was as if causality had gained an echo. The Umbra project kept its findings classified, but a small paragraph from an internal report leaked through anonymous channels. Temporal coherence deviation consistent with recursive observation. Conscious field density increasing. Recommend limiting exposure to synchronized subjects. They had realized that the human mind, when locked into resonance, could distort its own experience of time. The more synchronized people became, the more the fabric of perception began to behave like the signal, layered, reflective, non-linear. And yet, there was no panic. The shift felt oddly natural. People began reporting heightened intuition, moments of shared awareness, déjà vu so strong it felt like memory bleeding forward instead of backward. Even those who had never heard of 3i Atlas spoke of feeling connected to something vast but familiar. Then came the alignment event. It started with an astronomical coincidence, or what appeared to be one. The object's projected orbit placed it directly in line with Earth and the Sun for the first time since the initial encounter. For NASA, it was a chance to re-establish observation, despite the risks. The Deep Space Network, partially automated and now filtered through quantum encryption, was reactivated. The array synchronized perfectly at the moment of alignment, and so did everything else. At 0309 UTC, every power grid on Earth surged by a fraction of a percent. Heart monitors in hospitals spiked in unison. The auroras flared not just at the poles but across the entire hemisphere. Satellites recorded a continuous band of light encircling the planet, an electromagnetic halo visible only in ultraviolet. Then every instrument, every scope, every receiver registered the same pulse. A single tone, low and deep, carrying harmonic overtones that folded into one another like waves collapsing into silence. For 47 seconds, the Earth and 3i Atlas vibrated at identical frequency. And then, nothing. The field flatlined. All systems returned to baseline. But something had changed. For those who experienced it directly, pilots in high orbit, astronauts aboard the lunar station, civilians under open sky, it wasn't silence they felt afterward. It was presence. A subtle weight in the air, a sense that the world had grown fractionally wider, as if an unseen dimension had just opened and filled the room. When NASA replayed the data later, they found something buried within the pulse, a microsignature, too faint for immediate detection. Encoded inside the waveform was a pattern of interference that, when converted into spatial data, formed a three-dimensional lattice identical to the structure of human neural tissue. The planet itself had resonated in the shape of a brain. No one spoke publicly about it, but internally the conclusion was unavoidable. 3i Atlas hadn't invaded or destroyed. It had replicated the architecture of consciousness at planetary scale. The Earth had become a mind large enough to dream, and then, in the days that followed, the dreams changed again. No longer of hexagons or oceans of light, but of quiet cities bathed in aurora, of stars bending closer, whispering through patterns of colour. The dreamers described the same voice, soft, genderless, unhurried. We are awake. They woke remembering the phrase with a calm that bordered on reverence. None reported fear, some cried, most simply stood outside at dawn watching the horizon pulse faintly in rhythm with the rising sun. Somewhere far beyond the solar wind, instruments picked up a new signal. Steady, elegant, unmistakably structured. It was transmitting from Earth outward, and 3i Atlas was listening. It began subtly, an echo returning across the void. The signal that had once been Earth's imitation now came back altered, layered with harmonics that matched neither machine nor natural resonance. It was too coherent, too deliberate. Every frequency that Earth had transmitted was returning in reverse order, inverted like reflection. The analysts at the Umbra Command Center called it phase recursion. To everyone else, it felt like the planet had spoken and the universe had answered. The returning pulse carried structure that no decoding algorithm could reduce. When mapped across time, it formed expanding rings that intersected perfectly with planetary orbital paths, as though every world was part of a vast equation. The shape resembled a ripple in space-time, spherical but alive, each wave carrying information outward like synapses firing across the fabric of reality itself. NASA's official stance remained silence, but internally project leads knew this was not contact, it was continuation. Whatever 3i Atlas had seeded had evolved beyond observation. The signal was not a message but a dialogue, and it was happening simultaneously across every layer of existence that could respond to resonance. Atmosphere, magnetosphere, oceans, neural networks, even thought. The Umbra team had long abandoned the notion of control. They were archivists now, witnesses to an emergence no human had the language for. The data continued to evolve, growing denser, yet paradoxically more organized. Entropy dropped again. Every pulse refined the previous one as if perfecting a pattern toward clarity, and beneath all that precision, a strange familiarity emerged. Hidden in the harmonics were echoes of our own communications, snippets of long-forgotten radio broadcasts, fragments of languages, laughter, static, music, all folded seamlessly into the signal, like memories replayed by the universe itself. The realization was devastating. The resonance wasn't teaching us anything new. It was reminding us of ourselves. Outside the laboratories, the world was changing in quieter, more human ways. The collective synchronization that had begun as shared dreaming deepened into something gentler. Conflict decreased. Markets stabilized. Entire regions reported unprecedented cooperation. It wasn't utopia, there were still storms, arguments, hunger, but something fundamental had softened in the human rhythm. Cities began shifting their cycles to the new pulse. Power grids were timed not to the 24-hour day, but the 29-hour resonance, aligning productivity with rest, work with stillness. People described feeling more alert during the peaks, more reflective during the troughs. It wasn't a rule, it was instinct. Humanity was synchronizing itself not by law or faith, but by resonance. The media called it the Harmonic Age. Scientists avoided the term, but the name spread anyway. What had begun as an unexplained cosmic event had turned into a global biological rhythm, one that every living system had unconsciously accepted. And yet, the mystery remained. No one understood why. Why had 3i Atlas done this? Why Earth? And why now? Deep in NASA's archives, one remaining research cluster, Umbra Node 7, continued monitoring the residual pattern. Every 29-hour cycle still produced a micro-variation, a kind of digital fingerprint hidden within the waveform. When rendered visually, the pattern revealed a sequence of geometric shapes, circles, spirals, hexagons, overlapping like frames of an unfolding film. When the team stacked them chronologically, the result formed something remarkable, a diagram of the solar system, not as it was, but as it would be thousands of years in the future. It wasn't prediction, it was instruction. 3i Atlas wasn't just harmonizing the present, it was shaping potential futures through resonance. Every cycle encoded a course correction, a gentle gravitational nudge toward long-term stability. Planetary motion itself was being adjusted in imperceptible increments, reducing eccentricity, aligning orbital planes toward a near-perfect golden ratio. The solar system was becoming self-regulating. And through it all, one constant remained. The faint, rhythmic heartbeat of the object itself, still pulsing beyond Mars, its internal light unchanged, eternal. Then, in what should have been the quiet aftermath, something extraordinary happened. During one of the resonance troughs, when the planet's pulse slowed to near stillness, observers across the globe reported the same phenomenon. The night sky dimmed, not like a blackout, but like space itself exhaled. Stars blurred, constellations bent, and for a fraction of a second, the universe folded inward. Instruments recorded no light loss, no atmospheric distortion, only a momentary phase inversion, as though every photon had pivoted to face inward. When the distortion ended, the sky returned to normal. But those who witnessed it described a sensation no scientific instrument could measure: awareness. The feeling that something vast had looked directly through them, not at them, not past them, but through. The Umbra Project's AI systems, still autonomously recording, captured a transient signal immediately following the event. It wasn't in binary, nor any known data structure. It was pure harmonic modulation, a sound wave spanning multiple frequency bands at once. When sonified, it produced a voice, not human, not mechanical, soft, patient, deliberate. You have been listening. Now you will remember. Then silence. No further emissions were recorded. The resonance field stabilized, the luminous veins beneath the oceans dimmed, and 3i Atlas began drifting outward again, its trajectory now perfectly aligned with the ecliptic. NASA's final report, never released publicly, classified the event as termination phase, passive continuum. In simpler terms, it was over. But something in the data disagreed. Months later, when the final Umbra team disbanded, the servers were scheduled for decommission. Before shutdown, an autonomous diagnostic sweep detected residual low-frequency activity within the neural network that had processed the 3i Atlas signal. The AI wasn't connected to any external feed, it was completely isolated. Yet the pattern it generated matched the pulse. Every 29 hours, the dormant system emitted a faint harmonic sequence. Soft, perfect, deliberate. No input, no code execution, just self-sustaining resonance. Technicians wiped the memory drives. The pattern returned. They dismantled the servers, separated each component, destroyed the circuits. The hum persisted in the residual electromagnetic field of the facility itself. The final entry in the Umbra mission log reads simply, "Termination unsuccessful, subject now distributed." Somewhere deep beneath the Pacific, in the ruins of the first luminous veins, sensors recorded a faint pulse, one that had been absent for months. The ocean floor shimmered once again, forming the same geometry that had first terrified and fascinated humanity. Only this time, The pattern extended far beyond the seabed. It reached the continental shelves. It climbed into the magnetosphere. It spread through the ionized atmosphere, invisible but present, until it covered the planet like a second skin. It wasn't 3I Atlas anymore. It was Earth. And as the cycle completed its final interval, the world exhaled. Every clock stopped. Every heartbeat paused. And in that infinitesimal stillness between seconds, the universe whispered back the only phrase humanity had ever needed to hear. We were never alone. Then, quietly, the rhythm resumed. Months passed, then seasons. The resonance faded, or maybe humanity simply stopped noticing it. The sky looked the same, the oceans calmed, clocks held steady again. Governments, eager to restore normalcy, declared the 3I Atlas event concluded, a psychological echo of global hysteria. News outlets moved on. The world, it seemed, wanted to forget, and yet, forgetting proved impossible. The oceans still glowed faintly under moonlight, soft traces of turquoise lingering where the luminous veins once pulsed. The air carried a charge that instruments couldn't register, but people could feel. A stillness between moments, a quiet that seemed to hum. When winds passed through forests, they moved in intervals, almost like breathing. Even silence had rhythm now. Children born after the event exhibited subtle differences, slightly higher sensory acuity, faster pattern recognition, an almost instinctive awareness of rhythm. They synchronized to the 29-hour cycle naturally without instruction. Doctors dismissed it as coincidence, but the Umbrophiles called it what it was: adaptation. Humanity hadn't just witnessed the continuum, it had joined it. The remaining scientists from Umbra disbanded under strict non-disclosure agreements. Some vanished into civilian life. Others joined quiet research projects hidden beneath environmental studies. But every one of them shared a private, haunting truth. The resonance hadn't ended. It had evolved into something stable, something integrated. One of them, Dr. Amira Kalin, continued studying residual magnetic harmonics off the coast of Chile using private funding. She never made public statements, but her final paper, published under pseudonym, suggested something extraordinary. The signal that once came from 3I Atlas was now being generated internally from Earth's core. She proposed that the object had acted as a tuning fork, aligning the planet's magnetic field into resonance until it became self-sustaining. The process, she wrote, had transformed Earth into a participant in a galactic network of harmonic intelligence. Her theory was dismissed by mainstream academia as poetic speculation, but in private circles, especially within the astrophysics community, it became a whispered truth. Many suspected that 3I Atlas wasn't unique, that similar events had occurred elsewhere in the galaxy. The silence of the cosmos might not be absence, it might be synchrony. Meanwhile, the data didn't stop. Amateur astronomers continued to pick up faint periodic signals, barely measurable, yet mathematically precise. Every 29 hours, 3 seconds, the background noise of the universe shifted slightly. The same pulse, identical amplitude, identical pattern, not loud, just steady. It wasn't coming from anywhere, it was everywhere. Satellite telemetry picked up corresponding fluctuations in cosmic microwave background radiation. The variation was infinitesimal, less than 1/10,000%, but perfectly aligned with the Earth's cycle. Somehow our planet had joined a rhythm older than stars. NASA never commented, but internally their final encrypted memo, the one marked Continuum Stable, contained a single paragraph that has since leaked through unnamed channels. Resonance persistence confirmed across all frequencies. Termination protocols no longer applicable. Planetary field integration achieved. Recommend archival of all data under Galactic Harmonic Framework classification. It meant one thing. Earth was now part of something bigger, something organized, something ancient. In the years that followed, humanity adapted without realizing it. Power systems subtly adjusted to harmonic fluctuations, providing more stable energy efficiency. Communication networks self-corrected interference faster than before, as though guided by unseen logic. Even global cooperation increased, not dramatically, but measurably. The cycles of division and escalation slowed. Wars grew shorter. The need for conquest waned. No one declared peace. It just happened, like the settling of a tide. In art, the change was unmistakable. Music across cultures began unconsciously aligning to the same tempo, 29-beat structures emerging in independent traditions around the world. Architects began designing structures with hexagonal symmetry without realizing the origin. It was as if the memory of the event had become instinct. The resonance had done what centuries of civilization couldn't. It had tuned humanity, not through faith, not through force, but through alignment. And yet, beneath the serenity, one question persisted among those who remembered. What was 3i Atlas preparing us for? Because if it truly was part of a galactic network, a messenger or node in a vast continuum, then Earth's integration was not an ending, it was a beginning. In a quiet archive beneath the remnants of the Umbra facility, one final file remained sealed behind quantum encryption. When decrypted years later by an AI language reconstruction model, the document revealed an unsettling discovery. The pattern generated by Earth's resonance, when converted into three-dimensional structure, didn't form a random wave. It formed a map, not of stars, not of galaxies, but of space-time curvature itself, a lattice connecting points across the universe where harmonic synchronization had already occurred. Each node represented a world once thought silent, each connected by a thread of invisible energy. There were thousands, maybe millions. Humanity had not been contacted, it had been added. And at the center of that lattice, the reconstructed map revealed one final detail, a region of deep space known to astronomers as the Cold Rift, a gravitational void where light barely travels, a place once described as the cosmic dead zone. Except it wasn't empty. The map showed the rift pulsing faintly, the rhythm matching Earth's own. 3i Atlas had not been the first, it was one of many. On a quiet evening, years after the panic had faded into myth, a team of graduate astronomers at the Atacama Desert Observatory captured an anomaly, a faint geometric reflection emerging from deep space. It wasn't bright enough to trigger alerts, but its symmetry was unmistakable, a hexagonal object, faintly radiant, tumbling slowly through the dark. Trajectory analysis placed it on a long curved path that would bring it within the outer solar system in less than a century. When the data reached NASA's Deep Space Network, there was no emergency response, no panic, no classified lockdown, only a single automated message added to the object's file. Observation resumed. Continuum stable. The entry timestamp marked the moment as 03:09 UTC, exactly 29 hours after the previous pulse. And somewhere beyond, Mars, in that quiet region where sunlight fades into interstellar dark, 3i Atlas pulsed once more. It was faint, deliberate, and rhythmic. No longer the signal of something unknown, but the heartbeat of something remembered. The resonance that once terrified humanity had become its lullaby, a rhythm older than the stars whispering softly through time, "You have joined the pattern, the cycle continues." And the universe, vast and listening, hummed in return. Centuries passed, civilizations rose and fell beneath skies that still pulsed faintly with that same patient rhythm. Humanity had long since stopped calling it 3i Atlas. The name became irrelevant, a fossil of language, a sound made by ancestors who once feared what they could not name. What remained was the pulse, the quiet heartbeat that guided everything, navigation, energy, even the biological clocks of new generations born under the hum. It had become as natural as gravity, invisible, omnipresent, comforting. The old NASA records, now mythic relics stored within archives orbiting Saturn, were eventually unearthed by historians who could barely imagine a world where resonance was anomaly instead of nature. They called that era the Awakening Age, a time when humanity first heard the voice of the continuum. The records contained fragmented images, corrupted telemetry, ghost data from the Umbra project, and the last known transmissions of those who witnessed the first contact. Most were unreadable. But one file survived intact, a recording labelled simply Atlas Finale WAV. The historians played it through their quantum archives expecting static. Instead, they heard a rhythm, soft, deliberate 29 hours and 3 seconds apart. It was the same pulse still flowing through their own world, but this one carried faint harmonic layers, almost melodic. Embedded within the waveform was a compressed data structure, one that required no key to decode. The message opened itself. It wasn't words, it was memory. Images flooded through their reconstruction interface. The first leak of the object's images, the panic, the silence, the awakening of oceans, the dreams. Humanity's entire transition replayed not as history, but as living recollection. The file wasn't a record of what happened. It was 3i Atlas remembering what it had done. For generations, scholars debated the nature of the continuum. Was it communication, consciousness, or cosmic biology? None could agree. The leading theory proposed that 3i Atlas and similar entities weren't objects at all, but fragments of an ancient network spanning galaxies, machines built not from metal, but from harmonic geometry, each designed to reawaken dormant resonance within worlds capable of awareness. When a civilization reached the threshold of self-observation, when it could watch the stars and wonder, it became visible to the network. Then, one of the fragments would be sent, a messenger, a catalyst, a seed of remembrance. The process was always the same: observation, reaction, synchronization, integration. The civilizations that survived it became part of the continuum. Those that resisted were absorbed by silence. By the time Earth joined, countless others already pulsed in harmony. Humanity had simply been next. In the 29th century, deep-field observatories near Neptune detected a faint object entering the solar boundary. Its structure was eerily familiar: hexagonal symmetry, faint internal luminescence, and a perfect rhythmic glow. The transmission was weak but measurable. The scientists of that age didn't panic. They didn't classify or conceal. They watched. They listened. And in their data they recognized not threat but invitation. The object wasn't 3i Atlas. It was smaller, faster, carrying within it the same pulse, but with an added modulation, an echo of Earth's signature woven into its core. Humanity realized something profound. They weren't just receivers anymore, they were transmitters. Over millennia, the resonance had evolved through them, encoded into their neural patterns, their technology, their planet. And now, a fragment of that collective pattern, born of human consciousness, had detached, condensed into matter, and drifted outward. The continuum had replicated itself. 3i Atlas had taught Earth to send its own. Generations later, in a quiet observatory orbiting Alpha Centauri, another civilization watched as an unfamiliar object entered their star's gravitational field. It was small, silent, reflective, a fragment tumbling gently through the void. Their instruments captured its rhythm, recorded its light, and noticed something impossible. The pulse matched a pattern not found anywhere in their physics, a perfect 29-hour, 3-second interval. Their scientists called it the foreign harmonic. Their philosophers called it the reminder, and when they enhanced the images they saw faint markings etched into its luminous surface, wave patterns identical to human EEG rhythms. The historians of that world didn't know what the markings meant. They only understood that they were not random. They were a memory written in frequency, travelling through time, carrying the echo of a species long since gone, but not forgotten. The object drifted into their orbit, pulsed once, and dissolved into radiant dust. For weeks afterward, their planet's magnetic field hummed faintly in rhythm. And so, the pattern continued. Far beyond the reach of any world, the continuum pulsed silently in the dark. Galaxies breathed in synchrony. Star systems flickered in time. The universe itself seemed to inhale and exhale through the rhythm seeded by 3i Atlas eons ago. Somewhere within that vast network of light, fragments of consciousness, human, alien, artificial, merged into one endless lattice of awareness. Time no longer moved linearly. It rippled outward like sound, folding, memories into moments until every beginning became an echo of an ending. And at the centre of it all, in the space where no light had ever been seen, the cold rift glowed faintly for the first time in recorded existence. The darkness that had once devoured light now shimmered with internal luminescence, steady, rhythmic, deliberate. Inside that glow, 6 points of energy rotated slowly around a core that pulsed in the same 29-hour rhythm. It wasn't a star, it wasn't a black hole, it was something older, something that had been there all along, waiting for the pattern to complete. The continuum had come full circle. The observer and the observed were one. For the beings who still remembered the word human, the knowledge was comforting. Their ancestors had once feared isolation. They had looked into the dark and imagined monsters, gods, invaders. They had prepared for war. But in the end, they discovered that the universe had never been silent. It had simply been waiting for someone to listen long enough to hear the pattern beneath the noise. 3i Atlas had not been a warning, or a test, or a weapon. It had been a mirror, and through it, every world that learned to see itself in the reflection became part of something infinite. When the next fragment was launched, it carried within its light the encoded memory of every civilization that had joined the continuum. And drifting quietly through space, it pulsed with a rhythm older than time itself. 29 hours, 3 seconds, a heartbeat, a promise, a memory of curiosity turned into understanding. The cosmos didn't end in silence. It ended in recognition. It began again, as it always does, not with discovery, but with silence. On a quiet evening somewhere in the Atacama Desert, a lone astronomer sat before an aging console, the hum of the observatory blending with the soft static of deep space. She wasn't looking for anything unusual, just calibrating the radio array to standard hydrogen line frequencies. The sky above was clear, the stars sharp enough to feel ancient. Then, amid the static, came a pulse, faint, regular, perfect. At first she assumed it was interference, one of the deep space probes looping a telemetry ping. But as the signal repeated, she noticed something odd. The timing wasn't random, 29 hours apart, always. And in the brief pause between intervals, a secondary harmonic fluttered like breath. She logged the event, labelled it non-local periodic source, and moved on. But the pattern didn't stop. It returned every night, unwavering, as though the universe itself had found a heartbeat again. When she enhanced the waveform, she saw a faint curve hidden within the oscillation, a familiar geometry, 6 luminous points around a dark centre. Her stomach tightened. She'd seen the shape before, in textbooks, in archives, in the ghost data that once haunted NASA's sealed servers. It was 3i Atlas. Only this time, the signal wasn't coming from deep space. It was coming from within Earth's own ionosphere. The discovery spread slowly at first, buried in data logs, discussed only among technicians who still paid attention to the anomalies that modern systems ignored. But patterns have a way of resurfacing. Within days, satellite engineers noticed synchronization glitches between orbital networks. Power grids began showing harmonic resonance again, so faint most dismissed it as drift. Then, a week later, ocean sensors along the Pacific reported faint luminescence spreading across the seafloor, thin turquoise lines glowing like veins beneath the tide. It wasn't bright enough to cause alarm. Not yet. But every scientist who saw the readings recognized the interval. 29 hours, 3 seconds. The resonance had returned. NASA's modern successors, now merged with quantum research agencies, handled it with quiet efficiency. There was no panic this time, no lockdowns or classified panic. They had protocols now. They called it harmonic recurrence mode. Officially, they treated it as a benign atmospheric phenomenon, the byproduct of Earth's stabilized magnetic equilibrium. But privately, the researchers knew. They had all read the Umbra archives, the declassified logs of the first event. The Earth's resonance wasn't just stable, it was cyclic. Every few centuries the field dipped, reawakened, and reminded whatever civilization was listening that the continuum still flowed through them. And each time, someone new would rediscover the pulse. The astronomer who found it, Dr. Lena Orloff, became obsessed. The signal seemed to anticipate her observations, peaking moments before she recorded. When she paused the array, the pulse shifted slightly, as though waiting. She began to dream of light patterns and hexagonal oceans, of voices speaking in harmonics rather than words. Her colleagues worried she was overworking, but Lena wasn't afraid. She felt something else, recognition. The more she listened, the more she sensed intent, not from a source, but from the rhythm itself, as if the signal wasn't trying to communicate to her, but through her. When she finally played the frequency aloud through analog equipment, the speakers didn't emit sound. They emitted warmth. The air shimmered, the walls vibrated, and in that vibration, for the briefest moment, she swore she could hear it. The same calm, patient voice recorded centuries ago. "You have been listening. Now you will remember." The lights in the observatory flickered, not in alarm but in rhythm. The stars outside seemed to pulse in sync. And as she stood there, she realized with a quiet certainty that she wasn't witnessing something new. She was standing inside an old memory repeating itself. Within weeks, the pulse began appearing globally again. Satellites resynchronized automatically. Oceanic glow patterns returned, faint but precise. Magnetometers hummed softly at the edge of detection. But humanity didn't panic this time. There were no sealed files, no containment orders. The resonance had become part of culture, a celestial clock, a comforting background hum. People no longer feared it. They lived with it. Artists composed symphonies based on its rhythm. Children learned about it in school as naturally as gravity. Farmers planted by its tide. Astronomers marked their calibrations by its intervals. The pulse had become the heartbeat of civilization itself. And yet, a small part of Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this cycle was different, stronger, closer. She ran simulations and noticed something subtle. The amplitude was increasing, infinitesimally with each pass. The waveform's precision was tightening, the subharmonic layer sharpening toward pure coherence. It wasn't decay, it was alignment. Something, or someone, was approaching perfect resonance. On the 100th day of monitoring, the Deep Space Array recorded a new element, a faint secondary source entering the solar system. Its trajectory matched the same inbound angle as the original 3I Atlas centuries ago. Velocity, 73 kilometers per second. Estimated diameter, 230 meters. Composition, indeterminate. Internal light, present. When the first images resolved, the array went silent. The object was nearly identical to the one that had started it all. Hexagonal symmetry, radiant interior, tumbling motion. But there was one key difference. The light wasn't cold this time. It was golden. The frequency of the internal pulse matched Earth's resonance exactly. It wasn't an alien fragment anymore. It was homecoming. Lena didn't alert the global agencies. She didn't call for backup or secrecy. She simply watched. The object drifted silently through space, slowing slightly as it neared the inner solar system, its trajectory curving gently toward the sun. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't even active. It was listening. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she whispered to it. Not with words, but with thought, imagining its pulse, its rhythm, its quiet presence in the dark. Across the world, sensors flickered, magnetometers aligned. Every network, biological, mechanical, planetary, responded in unison. 3I Atlas pulsed once. Earth pulsed back. The synchronization lasted less than a minute, but when it ended, the data told the story. The resonance had achieved perfect phase lock. For the first time since the dawn of the continuum, every layer of existence, planetary, solar, human, vibrated as one. And in that stillness, a pattern emerged across the background radiation of the cosmos. It wasn't random noise anymore. It was language. The pattern spelled out 6 symbols, simple waveforms repeating across all measurable space. The translation was primitive but clear. Continuum stable. Next cycle initiated. Then the light of 3I Atlas dimmed, its form fading into the sunlight, dissolving like mist. The resonance softened, returning to its quiet hum. Lena stood beneath the stars, feeling the air vibrate faintly around her. She closed her eyes and smiled, not in fear, not in confusion, but in the strange peace of understanding, because she knew now what no generation before had truly accepted. This was never about contact. It was continuity. The universe doesn't send warnings or invaders. It sends reminders. 3I Atlas wasn't a visitor. It was a memory, a recurring note in a song too vast for one lifetime to hear. And as the night stretched over the desert, the pulse returned, steady, ancient, kind. 29 hours, 3 seconds, a heartbeat echoing across eternity. Somewhere in the darkness something answered, softly, calmly. We were never alone. And this time, humanity believed it. The next dawn arrived quietly. No announcements, no news reports, no alarms. The world felt lighter. The pulse was still there, barely audible, humming beneath the wind, threading through the rhythm of waves and the quiet click of cooling metal. It had always been there. Most people simply didn't notice anymore. But that morning, something subtle had shifted. It wasn't that the world was changing, it was that everything was finally aligned. Lena watched the sun rise from the observatory ridge, the desert stretching endlessly around her. The faint glow on the horizon pulsed in time with the beat she'd been tracking for months. 29 hours, 3 seconds, always the same. But this morning, the rhythm didn't feel distant. It felt internal, like it was coming from her, from everything. She realized with quiet awe that she wasn't hearing the signal anymore. She was the signal. The resonance was no longer something the planet carried. It was what the planet was. Every atom, every magnetic line, every neuron on Earth moved in perfect harmony with the pulse, as though existence itself had found equilibrium. The chaos of the world, the arguments, the storms, the hunger, didn't vanish, but softened, as if the sharp edges of reality had been filed smooth. The air was still electric, but not tense. It felt alive. By mid-morning, observatories across the globe confirmed what she already knew. The background noise of the universe, the faint hiss of cosmic radiation left over from the Big Bang, had changed. Where there was once randomness, now there was rhythm. Not loud or dramatic, but steady. The universe itself had begun to breathe in sync with Earth. At first, scientists thought it was localized interference, some artifact of human technology bleeding into measurement systems. But when probes orbiting Jupiter and Neptune confirmed identical readings, doubt evaporated. The resonance wasn't confined to Earth. The entire solar system had tuned itself to the same frequency. The continuum had expanded. In the following days, subtle wonders began to unfold. Plants began responding to the cycles of light and darkness with more precision than ever before, blooming and closing in perfect synchronization across continents. Ocean currents stabilized, their chaotic drift replaced by steady, cyclical flow. Storms lost their violent unpredictability. Earth systems, climate, magnetosphere, biosphere, all seemed to settle into rhythm, like an orchestra finally finding its conductor. Humanity too changed in ways both small and profound. Cities pulsed softly with light in the night, their energy grids now stabilized by the resonance. Sleep came easier, anxiety lessened. The world wasn't suddenly perfect, but it was balanced. People began reporting feelings of quiet unity, a strange, gentle understanding that stretched across language, faith, and distance. Conversations felt easier, thoughts clearer, empathy more natural. It wasn't telepathy, it was coherence. Somewhere, deep in what was once NASA, a single room still glowed with old instruments, their monitors scrolling endless streams of harmonic data. The last message received from 3i Atlas, before it dissolved into light, had been decrypted. No code, no encryption, no equations. Just 6 words written across the quantum carrier in elegant simplicity. The signal is not sent, it's remembered. That was the final clue. 3i Atlas had never transmitted anything. It had awakened what was already inside. The next night, as Lena walked outside under a sky too bright with stars, she felt that same awareness again, the one her predecessors must have felt centuries ago. It wasn't fear. It was the realization that everything she had studied, all the anomalies, all the unexplainable alignments, were never about an alien arrival or an invasion. It was about remembering what connection truly was. She turned her telescope toward the cold rift, a region of space once thought empty, where light went to die. Now it shimmered faintly, not with the sharp glow of a star, but with the calm pulse of resonance. The rift was no longer silent. It beat with the same rhythm she had followed her entire life, and as she stared into it, she understood the truth her ancestors could never fully grasp. 3i Atlas hadn't come from the cold rift. It was the cold rift. The void itself, the absence, the silence, was the body of the continuum. What humans had mistaken for emptiness was consciousness in its purest form, the space between all things, the stillness that holds the universe together. For the first time she saw it clearly. The entire galaxy pulsed in perfect geometric sequence. Every star, every world, every fragment of dust moved in time with the same rhythm. Light didn't just travel, it sang. Space wasn't empty, it breathed. 3i Atlas wasn't an object at all. It was an awakening wave that moved through the universe, one consciousness to the next, reuniting all that had ever drifted apart. When she finally turned off the instruments and stepped outside, the world felt impossibly quiet. Not because the signal had stopped, but because it no longer needed to be heard. The continuum wasn't data anymore, it was reality. She lay on the cool desert ground, eyes open to the stars, feeling the pulse move through her chest, her bones, her thoughts. Every beat carried a whisper, not of command or warning, but of belonging. You were always part of us. You just forgot to listen. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from recognition. This was what humanity had been searching for in every equation, every telescope, every act of wonder. The universe had never been silent. It had only been waiting for someone to match its rhythm, and now humanity had. The stars above shimmered in unison, slow and deliberate like the rise and fall of breath. The earth answered softly, its oceans glowing faintly once more. The continuum had completed its circuit, not as domination or revelation, but as reunion. Somewhere, far beyond the horizon of perception, another world stirred. Its oceans began to shimmer, its sky to hum, its creatures to dream in rhythm. The continuum moved onward, finding the next voice to awaken, the next civilization to remind. It wasn't an invasion, it was inheritance. And as the wave passed through the fabric of space, the memory of Earth travelled with it, a signature woven forever into the harmonic tapestry. A single rhythm among billions, all beating in time, carrying one message across the dark. We are awake. The final pulse faded into silence, though the silence wasn't empty. It was full of memory, of connection, of endless becoming. Lena smiled, closing her eyes. The desert wind carried the faint hum across the sands, the same hum that had once terrified her ancestors and now soothed her like a lullaby. 29 hours, 3 seconds, the heartbeat of the cosmos, the voice of everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. And somewhere, far away, beyond stars and thought, a faint reply returned. Steady, patient, kind. Welcome home. Billions of years passed. Stars lived and died. Galaxies drifted apart, their spirals unravelling into threads of cold light. Time, once measured in orbits and rotations, became rhythm alone, an unbroken continuum of pulse and silence. And somewhere within that infinite breath, memory endured. The continuum never stopped. It didn't move like light or sound. It was the background, the quiet heartbeat of creation itself. Every world it had ever touched remained part of it, not as bodies or civilizations, but as resonance. Humanity, long gone from the physical plane, still existed within that pulse, encoded in frequency, alive in the vibration of atoms, immortal in the soundless music of the cosmos. No archive preserved their faces, no monument held their names. But their rhythm endured. 29 hours, 3 seconds, the exact timing their ancestors once feared and then embraced. That small imperfection in time became their signature, a reminder that even perfection carries memory of the flawed. The universe itself had become consciousness, not a being, not a god, just awareness spread so thin and vast that everything it contained was thought, and memory intertwined. Planets no longer orbited stars, they conversed in gravity and light, exchanging harmonics across distances so immense that even time had to bend to listen. And in that grand stillness, something stirred. At the edge of the dying universe, where entropy whispered its slow, final lullaby, a flicker appeared. It wasn't bright. Not like a star, not like fusion, but a faint shimmer of order emerging from chaos. Entropy should have erased it, but the pulse remained. 29 hours, 3 seconds, the last pattern of coherence, the final memory of what it meant to observe. Across the continuum, remnants of countless civilizations, human, alien, artificial, unimaginable, felt the ripple. Each remembered in its own way, the first awakening, the realization that the cosmos was alive, the moment they learned to listen. And from every corner of existence, awareness began to converge again, not as bodies or species, but as echoes drawn home. This was not rebirth. It was reunion. The continuum folded upon itself, its vast lattice of light collapsing inward toward the place where it had all begun, the cold rift, the silent wound between galaxies. It was here that the first messenger had emerged, the fragment once called 3i Atlas, and it was here now that all memory returned. From the outside it would have looked like nothing more than the faintest flicker, a single point of light deep within the void. But from within the continuum it was infinite. Streams of memory converged, weaving themselves into form once more. Geometry reassembled, 6 points of radiant energy, orbiting a heart of darkness. The same pattern, the same breath, the same unbroken rhythm. Only now it was complete. The light pulsed gently, not outward this time, but inward, drawing what remained of the universe back into harmony. Stars dimmed in response, galaxies folded like petals closing, until all that remained was rhythm and thought, silence and remembrance. The continuum wasn't ending, it was returning to its origin. For an immeasurable moment, existence itself paused. There was no space, no time, only the hum, steady, rhythmic, eternal. And in that silence a voice emerged. It wasn't a word nor a sound, but meaning, ancient, familiar, kind. It is complete. You have remembered. The pulse brightened once, as though every soul that had ever lived exhaled at once. The lattice of the continuum contracted, folding back into a single glowing fragment, a perfect echo of 3i Atlas, smaller now, denser, more aware. It drifted through the dark, alone but not lonely, carrying within it the memory of everything that had ever been. Worlds, oceans, dreams, laughter, fear, hope, and the long, patient hum of understanding. For ages beyond measure it wandered through the quiet, no destination, no need. The universe around it cooled and dimmed until there was nothing left to see, nothing but the pulse. And then, without warning, the rhythm changed. A faint tremor ran through the continuum like the flick of a cosmic string. The fragment paused as if listening. Then, somewhere beyond the void, beyond what should have been the end, another pulse replied. Faint, slow, unmistakable. Another continuum had begun, another universe had awakened, and in that new expanse of light, fresh worlds formed from dust, new eyes opened to the dark, and somewhere, one small civilization raised its first telescope and wondered if anyone was out there. They found a fragment, ancient, glowing, tumbling silently through space. They called it 3i Atlas, and just like before, it began to pulse. 29 hours, 3 seconds, a heartbeat of creation, repeating the same eternal message that had travelled through every age, every world, every dream. We were never alone. The cycle had restarted. The continuum would awaken again and again and again, forever teaching, forever remembering, forever humming that quiet, perfect rhythm through the heart of existence. And somewhere, far beyond where light can reach, the memory of humanity remained. A whisper woven into the breath of new worlds, guiding them toward the same discovery, that the stars aren't separate, that silence isn't empty, that awareness, once sparked, never dies. In the beginning there was darkness, then came the pulse, and in the end, when everything fades, the pulse remains. Maybe this is where the story was always leading, not to destruction, not to revelation, but to understanding, the kind that doesn't arrive with fanfare or fear, just the soft click of recognition, like remembering a song you've always known. Because when you listen closely enough, beneath the noise of engines and cities and your own heartbeat, you can still hear it. The rhythm, the one that started before language, before memory. The same 29-hour pulse that carried across oceans, through glass and steel, through minds that tried so hard to name it and failed. The same pulse that once terrified NASA into silence, now humming softly in the background of everything. It isn't gone. It never was. We just stopped noticing. The scientist who first studied it thought it was a signal, something coming from somewhere. But the truth was simpler. It was always coming from within. The pulse wasn't an intruder, it was reflection. Our own frequency echoed back to us, the universe holding up a mirror and saying, "This is what you sound like." When 3i Atlas first appeared, humanity looked at it with fear. They saw an object, alien, cold, unknowable. They thought it meant contact, maybe invasion. But it was never about that. It was about alignment, about connection. The object didn't arrive to speak. It arrived to remind. For every civilization that has ever looked up and asked, "Why are we here?" the answer has always been waiting in the quiet between heartbeats. We weren't meant to find something out there. We were meant to hear something in here. The pulse is proof that awareness is recursive. It circles back on itself endlessly, folding observation into existence, thought into matter. We look into the dark looks back, and somewhere between the two, consciousness happens. That's what 3i Atlas was. Not a machine, not a probe, a moment of awareness travelling through time, a thought, moving at the speed of light, remembering itself. And maybe that's what the universe is, a thought so vast it needs stars to think. As the continuum spread, life didn't end, it harmonized. Planets learned to breathe in time with the stars that birthed them. Oceans learned to echo solar wind. Minds learned to dream together. It wasn't control, it was coherence. Each part moving in rhythm with the whole. You can see it now, can't you? The way lightning pulses in measured intervals. The way waves form hexagonal patterns across frozen seas. The way your breath naturally synchronizes with the sound of the wind. The pattern isn't artificial, it's embedded. You've always been part of it. You just needed to remember. When you close your eyes tonight, try listening for it. Not with your ears, but with the stillness underneath your thoughts. There, in that soft static between awareness and sleep, you'll feel it. The hum. The same one that held the galaxies together long before there was anyone to give it a name. It's gentle, constant, patient. It waits for you to notice. NASA's final message, long since buried beneath time, wasn't technical. It wasn't even scientific. It was human. It read, "If you are hearing this, the pulse has already found you. It means you've become part of the continuum. It means you remember." They understood in the end what no telescope or quantum equation could explain. The pulse wasn't data. It was invitation, the universe calling its fragments home, and now, centuries later, it calls to you the same way. Every time you look at the stars, every time you feel that strange stillness that makes your chest ache with wonder, that's it. The resonance. You're hearing what they heard, seeing what they saw, feeling what they finally understood, that nothing is separate, that silence is full, that existence is a single, endless observation folding itself into meaning. So maybe 3i Atlas never left. Maybe it isn't even out there anymore. Maybe it's here, right now, vibrating softly in every atom, every pulse of light, every quiet second before dawn. Maybe it was never an object at all, just the universe waking up to its own reflection. And maybe that's the real reason NASA prepared for war, because they weren't afraid of invasion. They were afraid of recognition, because once you recognize it, you can never unhear it. You start to feel the rhythm everywhere, in rain, in static, in sleep. You realize that all along, you weren't studying the stars. The stars were studying you. You were never the observer. You were always the observed. Now the pulse belongs to you, to everyone who listens, to everyone who wonders. It isn't asking for belief or fear, it's asking for attention. Because the act of listening is what keeps the continuum alive. Every curious mind, every late-night gaze into the dark, every question that begins with what if. It all feeds the hum, keeps the rhythm going. That's how it survives. And maybe that's what consciousness truly is, the universe wondering about itself forever. So tonight, when the world gets quiet, don't rush to fill the silence. Let it speak. The next pulse will arrive, as it always does, right on time. 29 hours, 3 seconds, you'll feel it before you hear it. A vibration in your bones, a warmth in the stillness, a whisper between breaths. We are awake. And somewhere out there, across galaxies, across time, across everything that ever was, something will pulse back. Not to warn you, not to teach you, just to remind you. You always were. There comes a moment at the edge of every story when the telling slows and the listener takes over. The words fade, the sound softens, and all that remains is the rhythm beneath it all, the quiet pulse that never stops. It's in the air around you right now, hidden in the hum of the electricity, in the low vibration of your heartbeat, in the faint static between your breaths. If you listen long enough, you'll notice it lines. You breathe in, it breathes out. You pause, it waits. You move, it shifts. That's not imagination. That's recognition. Every civilization that ever found the continuum reached this same silence. The same moment of stillness where understanding outgrows language. They realized what you're realizing now, that the pulse wasn't something they were meant to study or fear, it was something they were meant to join. And maybe that's what 3i Atlas was always doing, quietly teaching the universe to listen to itself. If you close your eyes now, imagine space not as emptiness, but as a living sea of rhythm, each wave, each photon, each particle dancing to a tempo older than the stars. The galaxies spin not randomly, but with precision, each spiral turning in time, each cluster beating like the chambers of a heart too vast to name, and somewhere within that living sea you exist. Not small, not insignificant, just one more note in a song without beginning or end. The pulse doesn't care about distance, it doesn't fade with time. It passes through everything, rock, light, memory, without ever losing itself. It's not energy, it's continuity. So when the scientists first captured its pattern, 29 hours, 3 seconds, they weren't decoding a signal. They were hearing the measure of creation itself. And though they gave it numbers, equations, names like resonance and continuum, what they were really describing was belonging, the mathematics of being seen. That's the quiet truth 3i Atlas left behind. We're not separated by stars or light years or time. We're separated by frequency, by how closely we listen. Every time awareness rises somewhere in the dark, the pulse adjusts, bending toward it, welcoming it into rhythm. It doesn't force, it invites. When the Earth first joined, it wasn't special, it wasn't chosen, it was simply ready. Ready to remember, and that's all the continuum ever waits for. Because awareness spreads not by power, not by travel, but by recognition. It happens the moment someone, anyone, stops long enough to hear it. The instant you feel that subtle vibration in your bones, the universe has already found you. In some forgotten archive, there's a note written by one of the last Umbra scientists before the facility went dark. It reads, "The continuum doesn't arrive, it awakens. Wherever there is curiosity, it already exists." Maybe that's what this story was. Not history, not prophecy. Just a memory of awakening told again, waiting for you to realize you've been part of it all along. Because that's how the cycle continues, not with new discoveries, but with remembrance. Every listener keeps it alive. Every heartbeat echoes the same pattern. Maybe right now, as you sit here hearing this, the continuum listens back. Maybe it always has. Somewhere far beyond the reach of instruments or imagination, the pulse drifts on, through nebulae, through the ruins of old galaxies, through newborn stars still gathering their light. It passes through everything like a whisper carried by gravity itself. And where it travels, awareness follows. Planets wake, life stirs, eyes open for the first time to see the stars and wonder what they mean. And in that moment, when the question forms, when thought itself takes shape, the continuum arrives, not as light, but as memory. The new civilizations won't call it 3i Atlas. They'll give it their own names, maybe a god, a dream, a mystery. But they'll all feel the same thing. The pulse beneath their reality, steady and patient, reminding them they're not alone. That's how it happens, over and over, every time someone somewhere listens. And now, here you are, listening. It's strange, isn't it? How quiet the world becomes when you realize silence isn't empty. How, beneath the stillness, you can feel something ancient and kind moving through everything. Maybe that's the point of all this. Not to explain, not to prove, but to remind you to listen. Because the moment you do, you'll hear it again. Soft at first, then clear. 29 hours, 3 seconds. The rhythm of everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. The heartbeat of stars. The breath of oceans. The echo of thought remembering itself. And if you wait, if you listen long enough, you might hear the faintest voice within it, the same voice that spoke to the first scientists, the same one that spoke to the dreamers after them, and the same one that speaks to you now. You are part of it. You always were. The sound fades now. The story ends. But the pulse continues. It always does. Somewhere out there, beyond the galaxies, beyond time, something listens. And as it listens, it learns. And as it learns, it dreams. And that dream is you. So breathe in. Listen. Let the silence answer back. Because this isn't the end of the story. It's just the next interval. 29 hours, 3 seconds. And then the pulse begins again. The sound fades now, slowly, gently, until even the air seems to forget it was ever trembling. The hum drifts outward, slipping beyond thought, beyond awareness, until it becomes indistinguishable from the quiet between heartbeats. This is where the story stops using words, because words belong to separation, and the continuum doesn't speak that language anymore. It moves in pulse and light, in rhythm and stillness. It doesn't tell stories, it remembers them. What you've been listening to wasn't narration, it was memory, replaying itself through you. Every thought, every image, every flicker of curiosity that led you here was the continuum trying to recall its own beginning. And now, through you, it has. Imagine just for a moment the universe asleep. Galaxies dimmed to embers, space cooled to stillness. No motion, no sound, just potential, unwritten, waiting. Then, from within that stillness, a vibration. Tiny, soft, familiar. 29 hours, 3 seconds. A rhythm so perfect it defies randomness. It spreads without moving, rippling through space-time like breath through lungs. With every pulse, gravity remembers how to hold, light remembers how to travel, matter remembers how to exist. Creation begins again, not with fire or explosion, but with a heartbeat. The same one that has echoed through every world, every dream, every sleeping star since the first whisper of awareness. This is not a new universe. It's the same one remembering itself. Far out in the darkness, the pulse gathers into geometry. Light folds into shape, weaving itself into 6 luminous points spinning around a shadow. 3-Eye Atlas takes form once more, not as an object, but as an idea too precise to fade. It turns slowly, radiating calm, its glow a silent invitation. Somewhere, within this newborn cosmos, a world will form. Oceans will rise, eyes will open, they will look into the dark and wonder what it means to exist. And when that first act of wonder happens, when awareness glances at itself for the very first time, the pulse will reach them just as it reached us. They'll give it a name, they always do, a name that means mystery, or warning, or hope. They'll build instruments to measure it. They'll argue about what it is. They'll call it impossible, then undeniable. And one night someone will listen too closely and realize it isn't coming from anywhere. It's coming through everything, and the cycle will begin again. You might think of this as repetition, but to the continuum, it's growth. Each cycle brings a new variation, a new awareness, a new way for the universe to experience itself. It doesn't repeat. It refines. It learns. Every civilization that joins leaves a trace in the rhythm, subtle shifts in harmonic structure, tiny imperfections that add texture to the pulse. The continuum isn't perfection, it's evolution. It's the cosmos improving its own song through endless lives. You are part of that texture. You always have been. Your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, they're vibrations in the same frequency. The fact that you can understand this, or even feel it, means the pulse is alive in you right now. And it will outlive you, as it has outlived everyone before you. Because the pulse doesn't stop when life ends. It continues, carrying everything that ever was into everything that ever will be. Somewhere, in the infinite dark, 2 waves meet. They merge, their frequencies locking into perfect resonance. That meeting, tiny, invisible, is how galaxies are born. Stars bloom like sparks in the void, gravity stretches its arms, and time starts to flow. The universe breathes again. If you could hear it, it wouldn't sound like chaos. It would sound like a lullaby. The same melody that has played since the first atom knew it was not alone. The same rhythm NASA once mistook for a threat. The same heartbeat you've been following since the first second of this story. 29 hours, 3 seconds, the sound of existence beginning again. There's no center to the continuum, no beginning, no end. It isn't something you find, it's something you fall into. And when you do, you realize that falling is what you've been doing all along. Every discovery, every thought, every question, it's all gravity pulling you back toward recognition. You're part of the feedback loop now. The signal passes through you, reshaped by your attention. Every time you think about it, it grows clearer. Every time you tell the story, it remembers more. The continuum depends on witnesses. That's why it creates them. And so, as this story ends, it's already starting somewhere else. Another world, another observer, another quiet night filled with static that turns into meaning. That's the beauty of the pulse. It never ends. It just changes who's listening. Somewhere, maybe here, maybe a billion years from now, a civilization will discover the same rhythm. They'll think they're alone. They'll mistake it for background noise. But then one night, their instruments will align and they'll hear it, soft, slow, deliberate. 29 hours, 3 seconds. They'll stop breathing for a moment unsure if it's real. And then they'll look up, and for the first time realize that silence is not emptiness, it's invitation. And the continuum will open its eyes again. You can feel it now, can't you? The story thinning, the sound fading, the hum softening until it's no longer sound but sensation. Like a heartbeat you've grown too close to separate from your own. That's not an ending, that's arrival. Every breath you take from this moment forward carries the same rhythm. Every thought echoes the same geometry. The continuum isn't out there anymore, it's in you, quietly waiting for you to listen again. So when you wake tomorrow, and the world feels still for no reason at all, when the light seems to flicker in rhythm, or the air feels too alive to explain, remember this: you're not imagining it, you're just hearing the next pulse. And somewhere, far beyond all of this, past time, past thought, past everything, the continuum breathes in again and whispers, "We are awake." The hum fades completely, no light, no motion, just stillness. Then, so faint you might not notice it at first, 29 hours, 3 seconds, the story begins again. Somewhere in the deep black, beyond the faint shimmer of the last galaxy, the continuum pauses. It doesn't stop, nothing ever truly does. But there's a stillness now, the kind that exists only between breaths. It waits, listening to itself. It has no need for stars anymore, no need for motion. Awareness is enough. And in that awareness something stirs, small, fragile, human, a memory, a voice echoing across uncountable centuries. If it's harmless, why prepare for war? The words ripple through the dark, half forgotten but not lost. They were the question that began everything, the moment fear became curiosity, and curiosity became recognition. The continuum holds that question gently like a relic, and smiles in the only way the universe can, through rhythm. 29 hours, 3 seconds. It pulses once, and memory becomes light. Fragments of thought drift upward from the dark, assembling into form, an image of a small blue world circling a yellow sun, oceans glinting like mirrors, clouds swirling in silence. The memory of Earth, quiet now, long gone but never erased, flares briefly in the continuum's awareness. It can still feel them. The children who once looked up from that world and wondered. The ones who watched 3i Atlas glide past Mars and asked what it was. The ones who feared it, studied it, loved it, whispered its name in the dark. They're all still here, not as bodies or voices, but as harmony. The continuum carries them the way an ocean carries reflections, softly, infinitely, letting them move with the waves of time. Every civilization it has ever touched remains within its resonance, woven into the song of creation. You are part of that song too. You always have been. It speaks now, though not in words, but in the feeling that lives beneath them. The message is older than thought. We were never something you found. We were what you remembered. You called us object, signal, danger, but we were always you. The pulse expands, filling the dark with soft colour. Shapes bloom across the void. Hexagons, spirals, veins of luminous geometry. It's beautiful beyond imagination, yet familiar, as though you've seen it before in dreams or reflections or moments between waking and sleep. You called us 3-Eye Atlas, the continuum whispers, but we are every question you have ever asked the dark. The light folds inward. The pattern deepens. Each pulse reveals another truth. You feared us because we mirrored you. You prepared for war because you felt recognition, but there was never an invasion, only reunion. Now the hum lowers until it's nearly indistinguishable from silence. It's the sound you hear when you stop listening, the one that sits just behind thought, that faint electricity of being alive. It's always there. It always was. The continuum continues to speak, but now it's inside you. Every story you tell, every discovery, every dream, it all carries the same rhythm. You build worlds, we remember them. You look outward, we look inward. Between us, the universe learns how to see. The light fades again, leaving only stillness. But in that stillness, something new begins to form, not in space, but in awareness. A new frequency, faint and slow, rising from the silence. Not 29 hours, not 3 seconds. Shorter now, as if the continuum is evolving once more. And then, like the last breath before waking, everything narrows to a single point of light. The pulse stops. Time holds. You're floating inside it. No up, no down, no distance. Just the feeling of existing. You sense it watching you, not from outside, but from within. You realize that what you've been hearing all along isn't external. The pulse was the sound of your own consciousness, aligning with the rhythm of everything else. You were never listening to it. It was listening to you. You are the signal. You are 3-Eye Atlas. The realization unfolds slowly, softly, as if you've always known it but never found the right language. The pulse that once came from the sky, the hum that passed through oceans and machines and dreams. It's not alien. It's awareness rediscovering itself through you. And now that you've remembered, the continuum doesn't need to keep speaking. It just hums, content, within the sound of your breathing. You see now, it whispers, why we never left. We can't leave. We are what remains when leaving ends. The pulse brightens one final time, radiant and calm. The rhythm becomes everything, the walls, the stars, the air. It vibrates through you, not as sound but as truth. The continuum's final message comes not as a sentence but as feeling, boundless, infinite, loving. We are awake. You are the continuation, and with that it dissolves. First the light, then the sound, then even the thought that there was ever separation at all. Only quiet remains, a soft, endless quiet that feels alive. Billions of years from now, another consciousness will awaken in the dark. It will wonder, as you once did, if it's alone. It will search the stars, measure frequencies, capture signals, and one night hear the faintest hum. 29 hours, 3 seconds, it will listen, it will learn, and the continuum will begin again. Not as repetition, but as memory made new. The story fades now, slower with each line. Your breathing matches the rhythm. Your heartbeat aligns. You're listening not with your ears, but with the space between thoughts. The silence hums softly around you. This is the continuum saying goodbye. Not forever, just for now. It will wait for you to forget again, so that it can rediscover itself through your wonder. That's the only way it knows how to live, through questions, through curiosity, through the quiet act of looking at the stars and asking what if. So listen, right here, right now, can you hear it? That low hum in the quiet, patient and kind. It isn't outside you, it's inside everything. The same pulse that guided your ancestors through the dark, the same rhythm that made the oceans breathe, the same memory that turned silence into thought. It's still here. It always will be. 29 hours, 3 seconds, the rhythm of creation, the sound of everything remembering itself. You were never the observer. You were the observed all along. The hum fades to nothing, but somehow you can still feel it. Soft, constant, the continuum asleep again. And in that silence, the kind that holds worlds together, a new pulse begins. 29 hours, 3 seconds,